Hello, I'm Doug, and this is the Taste and Sensibility channel. And today we're having another episode of 10 Tastes for Whiskey Drinkers. And the topic today is new make, White Dog, Moonshine. And this is interesting because this is the distilled spirit from some mash, some grain mash, before it goes into the barrel. It is unaged. So it doesn't pick up the color. It doesn't pick up some of the flavors. Its flavor is totally that of the spirit that's just been distilled. But before we get into tasting this, let me remind you to like the video, give it a thumbs up down below, leave a question, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you click the bell, you will get notified when the new videos pop out on Mondays and Thursdays. These are 3 samples that I can buy in my area, at grocery stores and liquor stores. And you may have very different selections in your area, but take a look for them in the moonshine section usually. And you will find something from a distillery that you may recognize. That's probably the best way to taste it. If it's from a distillery you don't recognize, you don't know what you're getting. So I have a bottle of George Dickel number 12 Tennessee Sour Mash Whiskey. And this is the same juice before it's aged. It's called White Corn Whiskey. It's from the same mash bill, and then it gets the same charcoal filtering or mellowing that the George Dickel Tennessee Whiskey gets. But this goes on to a barrel and ages for 6 to 8 years probably. This does not go into a barrel. So it's got the same flavors as this stuff. And then this goes on and it picks up barrel flavors. The same thing for Prichard's. This also is a Tennessee whiskey that does not do the charcoal filtering or mellowing as they call it. It is mostly white corn, rye, and wheat, which is a very odd mash bill. So it could taste a little different. And then the third member here is from Still Austin, new make whiskey, corn, wheat, and barley. But tasting these together helps you understand what comes out of the ferment and mashing and fermentation, and then the still versus what comes out of a barrel years and years later. So we'll pour a little taste of the George Dickel. And I have tasted these a little bit so far, and they're not all that exciting. They're interesting. You recognize things. You get some corn sweetness. They're mostly in a bourbon style, but the lack of touching oak keeps it from being a bourbon. But talking about the juice, this is very sweet on the nose. It's got a sweet, corny nose. Maybe like popcorn or cornbread. And it makes you think it's going to be sweet. There's a bit of alcohol in there too. So on the palate, there's not as much heat from the alcohol as I would have thought. This is 90 proof. 91 proof. There are corny notes. There's something that reminds me of corn. So it's not really a syrupy sweetness, but it's a corn sweetness that comes through pretty strongly. I'm not getting a lot of burning on my tongue or mouth, but I would say there's a complete lack of oakiness or bitterness or even vanilla. There's something that's vaguely like vanilla, but it's far from what I usually pick up in most bourbons or whiskeys. So interesting, and I can certainly see how it connects to this stuff and what the family relation is there. So that's pretty interesting. Now this is Benjamin Prichard's Lincoln County Lightning. that was spilled to myself. So this is different, and it's got wheat and rye both in the mash bill, and white corn. So the white corn is the distinctive for their Tennessee Whiskey mash bill. It's different than their Bourbon mash bill. And putting together rye and wheat in the same whiskey is a little odd in American whiskeys. Usually go with rye for spiciness, or replace it with wheat for more sweetness and lack of spiciness. Definitely a corny note on the nose. I would say it's interesting. There's baking spices, nutmeg or clove. It's not as spicy or as hot as cinnamon, but it's a mixture of baking spices in the mid palate. It's not on the front, it's not on the arrival, and it's not on the finish really much. The sweetness is all the way through. The sweetness is on the arrival and the finish, and everything in between. So the corniness and sweetness are easy to detect. There's an odd assembly of spices, which doesn't mean spicy or peppery, it just means baking spices, interesting flavors, herbal things. And maybe some vague imitation of vanilla. And most vanilla, everyone attributes it to the wood, to the aging in the oak casks. Because vanillin, a major constituent of vanilla flavoring and aroma, is in there. And it comes out into whiskey and everyone tastes it. This has sort of a faint image of vanilla in there somewhere. So very interesting. And lots of flavors and aromas to dissect and pick apart. I thought early on they would be devoid of some of the flavors that I'm used to, but they have several of them. They just don't have anything we attribute to oak. Now, still Austin. The nose is different. It's kind of old and musty, which is strange coming from new make. There's an old dusty, musty note to it. I didn't get as much corn sweetness on the nose as the other two had. And I'm not getting as much on the palate either. Interesting. Okay, there's a sweetness that's buried, it's deeper down, it's not as intense. And I would say it's corn. There's a different kind of graininess to this that the other two did not have. And I'm not sure what I attribute it to, but it's got to be the mash bill and the fermentation, because there aren't any other parts to it. It's got a different set of spices or herbal notes to it. They're different than the Prichards had. But the big musty note in the middle, palate and nose, something sat around and got musty. Is hiding the spiciness or the herbalness of it. Spiciness in the sense of baking spices. Not that you could pour it on Mexican food. So, wow, more different than I would have expected. They've been changing slightly since I opened them months ago. I was gonna make a trip to Buffalo Trace. I was gonna do some Kentucky distilleries, and I knew that they sell their new make pretty freely at the distillery, and that was one of my plans to get that. But the trip got delayed a little bit, and then COVID-19 things hit, and no one's traveling. So I was very glad to get these 3 examples, and that one of them is the same juice as a whiskey I have on my shelf. I looked around for the Prichard's Tennessee Whiskey, but all my stores have was the malted barley beverage. I bought this at a grocery store, strangely, but there aren't any other still Austin products in the New Orleans area that I know about. I've never seen them, so it's pretty odd to buy the new make and not have available any of the other expressions from this craft distillery in Texas. So I hope that gives you a few clues about new make. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's easy to taste and sip and drink, and probably no one's going to want a whole bottle. But here I have 3, so I'll think of something to do with them. So it's one more set of tastes that let you pick apart things on your understanding of whiskey and what comes from the spirit and what comes from the barrel. Please like the video down below, give it a thumbs up, and leave a question, leave a comment, leave some sign that you were here, and subscribe to the channel and click that bell to get notified. And cheers until next time.
Whiskey drinking women, they understand the things I do. They never beg me to stop drinking, 'cause they like drinking whiskey too. So